My fellow Americans, it is Whistleblower Wednesday, and you will not believe the breaking story that I have for you. And we're not even going to waste any time getting there because this is far too monstrous. And good old Donnie Trump and Elon Musk may just be on the way from the penthouse to the outhouse in a heartbeat. And I'm literally going to get to that in just a few seconds. Let's have a little moment from Trump and Musk of then and now, right before I show you the story. Take a quick look at this.
That a person in our government, Katie, would delete or get rid of 33,000 emails. That gives me a big problem. After she gets a subpoena, she gets subpoenaed, and she gets rid of 33,000 emails, that gives me a problem. Now, if Russia or China or any other country has those emails, I mean, to be honest with you, I'd love to see them. Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Elon Musk!
I'm not just MAGA. I'm dark, gothic MAGA. Your money is being wasted, and the Department of Government Efficiency is going to fix that.
Now put those two things in context. That's Trump asking for Russia's help some 10 years ago to win an election, and that's Elon Musk talking about what Doge is going to do right before this election and being chanted Elon. Odd, we hear a different chants going on around the country now, and it might just be because of this breaking story. All you have to know is Doge, Musk, Trump, Russia, Starlink, whistleblower. Look what just got exposed regarding Doge going into the U.S. Treasury and mucking around in all of our information. Here is the story.
And the people that I work with are very meticulous. They're borderline OCD, and these aren't mistakes that I've ever seen them make before. So for all these controls to be off, in this small amount of time, it doesn't speak to it being accidental.
Once you and your colleagues decided, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Buckeye.
No, and one of the things I also want to point out to you, because you did an outstanding job, Rachel, in going over exactly how foreign intelligence likely was able to try and access NLRB databases. This is more than just the NLRB. Dan is here because he's been brave enough to come forward with what he saw, what he witnessed, what he can actually establish through forensic data. We have heard from others there are many people like Dan, but who are afraid to come forward. And we've also heard that in addition to how the systems were being treated by Doge within NLRB, what we've also seen is that these systems were also connected to Starlink. Now, why is Starlink critical? Starlink is critical because the information that flows through Starlink goes directly to Russia.
Daniel, you're fairly new to this role. This is your first TV interview as a whistleblower, and also you're fairly new to the role at the National Labor Relations Board. You're just under a year with the agency. How did you first deduce that there was a problem?
So I spent a lot of time in the private sector, and you start to see these indicators of compromise sometimes, and they kind of raise red flags. And so when you start seeing those, you put together the puzzle, and more likely than not, that's how you flesh out a breach. And I saw those same indicators in my agency and started raising the flag.
So in your complaint that you shared with Congress, you include this screenshot we're going to show. It shows a large spike in data leaving the National Labor Relations Board. You say that's extremely unusual because data almost never directly leaves the databases. How do you know what was being removed, and is it possible you saw something that has a plausible explanation behind it?
I definitely would prefer that, actually. I've tried to prove the negatives multiple times. It correlates directly with data that was exiting the database at the same time. There's a lot of corroborating evidence that points to it. That was the first thing I tried to do, is just rule out every other solution before I went this route.
What has happened was back in last year, the Department of Defense has stopped using Starlink in any way, shape, or form because that is viewed as a direct pipeline. there. And this is something that is also being seen in other agencies, not just NLRB. The other thing that's really concerning is that, and I don't want to say that this was done intentionally, it could be done unintentionally by accident by those who are working within DOGE, which is they have allowed certain specific critical infrastructure in other agencies, such as within the Department of Energy, where you have nuclear regulatory agencies overseeing our nuclear stockpile, et cetera, where that has been now opened to the open internet. So critical infrastructure throughout the country has unfortunately been provided access to the open internet, which means our foreign adversaries like Russia can and may have access to all of that. So the way that I would frame this is that what Dan is seeing and what others like Dan are seeing within our government is that this is like Chernobyl and them seeing the control systems light up post meltdown. This is where we are.
Let me be clear on the issue of foreign access to NLRB systems. What you saw, Dan, is a Russian IP address. So you can spoof an IP address. It could be somebody pretending to be in Russia and not actually being there. Attempting to log into these systems in very close proximity to the time that DOGE was creating, DOGE, as you say, was creating accounts in order to access these systems. But there's no proof of who that was or if in fact that was, a foreign intelligence service or even a foreign actor, right? It was just a Russian IP address, right?
So there are some caveats, but to the effect, yes, it was the same geolocation multiple times, and it's just one of the small factors that adds up to the bigger picture. You have one of these, you consider it maybe a fluke, but you have 40 or 50 of these indicators, and the bigger picture becomes clear.
Let me ask you about the threat that you received, Dan. You and your colleagues at NLRB had decided to pursue a formal investigation into what you regarded as a breach of the data and systems at your agency. You prepared a request to CISA at the Department of Homeland Security to help you with that investigation. And then you received a threat at your home where you live?
Where I hadn't lived for too long either. I've only been there 2 months. The only place that I've actually updated that address is in the OPM database for my payroll with the government. That's really, I haven't even updated my bank card yet. So
can you tell us about the character of the threat?
I think it was vague enough to not be. Can I just?
I can jump in there for Dan because this is actually quite difficult for him to talk about because it is quite personal. So this is a letter who somebody had drafted. And within the letter, there was specific information about Dan that can only be obtained through, for example, internal databases within the government. Because it's not anything, and we've had individuals conduct an investigation. We've had our own investigative team conduct an investigation to see whether or not any of this is really easily accessible online, and it's not. And so there is information that very few individuals would know. It could be something that was submitted to the government on an SF-86, a security clearance background investigation, et cetera. And the fact that he's only been at this residence for 2 months or less. We have that. We have the fact that somebody literally figured out where he lives, taped this note to his door, and flew a drone above him while he was walking his dog.
Number one, boy, I sure hope they keep that young man safe. And number two, while we don't know the exact outcome of this yet, when you see a graph like what was shown by Jake Tapper on CNN, when you see a graph of a brief moment like that, of a massive spike of outgoing information, the world we live in today, 10 gigabytes doesn't sound like very much if you're downloading a highly produced piece of footage like a movie. But 10 gigabytes of pure personal data, just texts like, I don't know, all of your identity information, 10 gigabytes is a ton of information. And if that was a specialized group of information, specifically plucked from a specific part of the U.S. Treasury, I said if, folks, we are talking about, in context of the digital world we live in today, no doubt, the literal biggest leak in U.S. history. Stay tuned, stay healthy, stay smart, stay talking with your friends, but most of all, stay frosty.